At my retirement party, my daughter-in-law tried to poison me. She meticulously poured a fatal dose into my favorite chipped champagne glass. I calmly watched, then swapped it with someone else's. Minutes later, the wrong person collapsed, convulsing on the floor. This is just the beginning of my story. Like, share, and tell me where you're listening from. The music stopped, the laughter died, and a hush fell over the room as Beatrice, my unassuming friend, crumbled to the polished marble floor. Her eyes rolled back, a faint froth appearing at the corners of her mouth. Someone screamed. I stood there, a strange calm washing over me, watching the chaos erupt around her. Well, that wasn't supposed to happen to her, I thought, a shiver running down my spine that had nothing to do with fear. Just hours earlier, the atmosphere had been electric, filled with genuine celebration. I had just sold my consulting firm for a cool $23 million. $23 million. After 40 years of building it from scratch, it was finally time to step back. My son, Marcus, had been the one to insist on a grand retirement party. "Mom, you've earned this," he'd said, a little too enthusiastically for my liking. "Let's do it right. Everyone needs to see how successful you are." I suspected his motives were less about my success and more about him being seen as the son of a successful woman. But I humored him. The party was held at a rented estate, an opulent place with sprawling gardens and crystal chandeliers. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, had taken charge of the event planning. This was unusual. Chloe, typically, would complain about having to load the dishwasher, let alone coordinate a gala. Yet, for this party, she had transformed into Martha Stewart, incarnate. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the floral arrangements to the customized champagne flutes. She was everywhere, directing staff, fluttering between guests, her smile almost painfully bright. It was all a bit too perfect. A bit too eager. My gaze drifted to the bar area, where Chloe was momentarily alone, her back to most of the guests. I watched her, my eyes narrowing, as she reached into her small clutch purse. Her movements were swift, almost imperceptible. She pulled out a tiny glass vial, no bigger than my thumb. My breath hitched. With practiced ease, she uncorked it and emptied its contents into one specific champagne glass, a vintage crystal one with a barely noticeable chip on the rim that I always favored. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was my glass. The one she had personally handed to me earlier, claiming it was special for the guest of honor. A cold certainty settled over me. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. My first instinct was to shout, to expose her right then and there. But then, a different thought, sharper and colder, pierced through the panic. No, exposing her now would just create a scene, and she would deny it. Twist it. I needed proof. I needed to catch a snake, not just scare it away. I had to let it believe it had cornered its prey, ready to strike. A calculated calm enveloped me. A few minutes later, Chloe approached me, a fresh glass of champagne in each hand. Her smile was wide, full of what she hoped looked like daughterly concern. "Mom, you haven't touched your drink," she cooed, offering me the chipped glass. "Here, let me get you a fresh one. This one's been waiting." Her eyes twinkled with a malicious satisfaction that only I, who knew her so well, could detect. I took the offered glass, my fingers brushing hers. It felt heavy, not just with liquid, but with venom. "Oh, thank you, dear," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. I took a polite sip, letting the sparkling liquid barely touch my lips, before moving away as she turned to greet new arrivals. My eyes scanned the room, landing on Beatrice, who was chatting animatedly with a group near the buffet. She always held her champagne glass a little loosely. It was the work of a second, a quiet, almost invisible movement as I brushed past her. My glass was exchanged for hers, both identical in shape, both filled to the same level. The only difference was the chip on the rim, now in Beatrice's hand. Less than 5 minutes later, the air filled with the horrible sound of choking. Beatrice had just taken a hearty sip. "Oh, this champagne has an interesting flavor," she had said, a small frown creasing her brow, before her face contorted in pain. Her hands flew to her throat. Her body began to shake uncontrollably. And then she fell. Chloe's scream was shrill, piercing through the sudden silence. "Beatrice! My God! Someone call 911!" She rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside Beatrice, her performance of shocked devastation almost convincing. Almost. She dabbed at her eyes, her voice laced with terror, as she urged guests to help. It was a masterclass in feigned grief. Marcus, my son, pushed through the terrified crowd. His face was pale, a stark white against his dark suit. He quickly took charge, directing people, talking calmly to the 911 operator on his phone. But as he knelt beside his wife, comforting her as she helped Beatrice, I caught it. A quick, almost imperceptible glance he shot toward Chloe. It lasted just a fraction too long. A silent communication that spoke volumes. My heart sank further. He was in on it. Or at least he knew. When the paramedics arrived, the scene was chaotic. I insisted on riding in the ambulance to St. Mary's Hospital, claiming Beatrice was a dear old friend. Inside the emergency room, I hovered, listening intently. "Acute poisoning," I heard one doctor murmur. "Plant alkaloids," judging by the rapid onset and neurological symptoms. My suspicions were confirmed. Chloe was a bundle of nerves in the waiting room. She paced relentlessly, wringing her hands, her voice a constant, anxious drone. "This is just terrible," she repeated, almost like a mantra. Poor Mom. What could have happened? She seemed genuinely distraught. If you didn't know the real story, Marcus, meanwhile, was glued to his phone, occasionally sending a worried glance in Chloe's direction, but offering little comfort. He looked more preoccupied than concerned. I decided to cast a line, just to see if she'd bite. Casually, as if merely making conversation, I said, "You know, it's lucky she didn't drink much of that champagne. She only had a few sips before she collapsed." My voice was even, calm. Chloe stopped pacing. Her step faltered almost imperceptibly. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide, and her face grew even paler, if that was possible. "Champagne?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What about the champagne?" The question was too quick, too sharp, a telltale sign of her slipping facade. I simply gave her a blank look, as if my comment was innocuous. A doctor finally emerged, his face tired but reassuring. "Beatrice is stable," he announced. "We've got the toxin mostly out of her system, but she's sedated. She'll need to stay overnight for observation." A wave of relief, mixed with a deeper sense of cold determination, washed over me. Beatrice would be okay. My plan had worked, but the real game was just beginning. As we walked out to the parking lot, Marcus caught up to me. "Mom," he said, his hand on my arm, "maybe you should stay with us tonight. You must be shaken up." The concern in his voice was thin, almost transparent. I saw the trap for what it was. He wanted to keep an eye on me, to control the narrative. "That's very sweet of you, dear," I replied, forcing a soft smile. "But no, I'll be fine." I needed my space, my quiet, to think, to plan. Back in the quiet sanctuary of my study, the house felt strangely empty, yet alive with the echoes of my thoughts. I poured myself a fresh glass of champagne, a different bottle, of course, and settled into my favorite leather armchair. It was time for what I called research, a deep dive into my sharp memory and a thorough investigation with my suspicious mind. The police would look for evidence, but I knew Chloe and Marcus better than anyone. I needed to understand the why. The motive was blindingly clear: the $23 million. Beatrice's poisoning was no accident. Someone, Chloe specifically, had intended to kill me. The plan, no doubt, was to make it look like a natural event for a 70-year-old woman, perhaps a heart attack or a stroke. The plant alkaloids would have made it appear that way, slow and insidious. Then, the vast sum of my newly liquid assets would pass directly to Marcus as my only child, and thus, into their greedy hands. I mentally scrolled through their financial woes. Marcus's architectural firm was perpetually struggling, barely breaking even. His projects were either stalled or underbid, and his clients were always late paying. Chloe's boutique, a glorified jewelry shop that sold overpriced trinkets, was a drain, not an income source. They lived in a ridiculous house, far too large for just the two of them, constantly boasting about its size while neglecting its upkeep. It was mortgaged to the hilt, and their fleet of luxury cars, always the newest models, screamed of debt rather than wealth. Every time I visited, there was a new problem: a leaky roof, a failing air conditioner, an unexpected tax bill. I recalled the numerous gifts I had given them over the years. Nearly $200,000, all told, for down payments, business investments, and to bail them out of various financial scrapes. At the time, I thought I was being a supportive mother. Now, I wondered if they had viewed these as mere advanced payments on an inheritance they couldn't wait to collect. The thought was like a bitter taste in my mouth, tainting years of supposed affection. The quiet of my study was broken by my phone ringing. It was Chloe, her voice laced with what she hoped sounded like genuine concern. "Mom, how are you feeling? You must be so shaken up. I've just spoken with Beatrice's doctor. He said it was a severe reaction to some medication she was on, perhaps mixed with alcohol. Nothing to worry about, just a bad combination." Her delivery was a little too smooth, a little too rehearsed. "Oh, really?" I feigned surprise, my voice carefully neutral. "Medication? That's quite a relief." I was starting to worry about the food at the party. You know, with so many dishes, sometimes things can go wrong. I watched her bait. Chloe quickly took it, her tone becoming sharper. "No, Mom." The doctor was very clear. It wasn't food poisoning. Everything was handled perfectly. It was a purely personal medical issue for Beatrice. She shut down the food angle with practiced ease, almost defensively. She was so focused on deflecting any suspicion from the party's arrangements that she didn't realize she was revealing her own anxiety about where the real problem lay. My eyes drifted to the remaining, unopened bottle of champagne from the party that was still on my counter. I had brought it home, almost instinctively, even before I fully processed the events of the evening. Now, I wondered if it contained any traces of the poison, even if it wasn't the exact bottle Chloe had tampered with. It would be valuable evidence if I chose to pursue it through official channels. The next morning, Marcus arrived on my doorstep with a box of pastries and an overly bright smile, playing the part of the concerned son. He always did this after one of their schemes, a subtle attempt to smooth things over. I watched him move around my kitchen, arranging the pastries, making coffee. A strange sadness washed over me. I remembered him as a little boy, full of dreams and innocence. Now, he was just a shell, hollowed out by greed. After some forced small talk about Beatrice's condition, Marcus finally got to the point, his voice softening, a practiced empathy in his tone. "Mom," he began, "we need to talk about your situation." He paused, looking earnest. "You're 70 years old, Mom. Living alone in this big house, all that money from the sale? It just seems like a lot for one person to manage." The audacity of it took my breath away. He was using Beatrice's near-fatal collapse as an argument for why I needed protection. "What if that had been you?" he asked, his voice now tinged with faux horror. "What if you'd collapsed and no one found you for hours?" He painted a vivid, horrifying picture of me lying helpless, while simultaneously implying that my current living situation was a dangerous mistake. Then came the real pitch. "Chloe and I have been doing some research," he continued, pulling out a glossy brochure. "We found this place called Sunset Manor. It's not a nursing home, Mom. It's a resort. Beautiful grounds, activities, excellent medical staff on site. And it's conveniently located, just 10 minutes from our house." He beamed, as if presenting me with a gift. "The best part," he added, his eyes gleaming with barely suppressed excitement, "is that they have one of their premier units available right now. But," he lowered his voice, "it requires a significant upfront entrance fee, about $400,000, to secure it quickly." I looked at the brochure, at the smiling, healthy seniors playing golf and painting. I heard the numbers, $400,000, and saw the implications immediately. Isolation. Once I was in Sunset Manor, away from my home, away from my financial records. Who would be in control? Who would make decisions about my remaining $22 million and about my care? They weren't just trying to get my money. They were trying to remove me from the equation entirely. I took a deep breath, keeping my expression neutral. "I'll think about it, Marcus," I said, my voice soft, almost compliant. "It's a big decision." I watched the visible relief flood his face. His shoulders relaxed, and a genuine smile, devoid of calculation, briefly flickered. He thought he had me. As he gathered his things, Marcus added, "Oh, Chloe wanted me to tell you that Beatrice needs to rest for a few days, so no visitors just yet." He delivered the message with an innocent shrug. It was another clear move to keep me from the victim. They didn't want Beatrice to accidentally let slip something, or for me to probe her with questions they couldn't control. They were trying to isolate me, and now, to isolate her. But they underestimated me. They always had. The realization clicked into place. They had waited until after the company sale. Not before, when my assets were tied up in a business. They understood the tax implications, the difference between an inheritance and a massive gift. Dying suddenly now, with $23 million in liquid funds, would trigger the largest possible payout for them. Their timing was not just calculated, it was utterly cold-blooded. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I knew by heart. "Arthur," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. "I need to see you. Soon. Like, today soon. Eleanor? Is everything all right?" Arthur Caldwell's voice was always calm, unhurried, even on the phone. "I'm not sure," I replied, a dark humor bubbling up. "But I think I'm about to find out." Arthur Caldwell was a thin, precise man, with wire-rimmed glasses that perched on the bridge of his nose. His emotions were always tightly controlled, his office almost sterile in its order. He was exactly the kind of lawyer you wanted when you suspected your family was trying to kill you. He had handled my business affairs, my will, everything, for decades. He knew me, and he knew my family's financial habits better than anyone. I sat across from him, recounting everything. The party, the celebration that turned sinister, Beatrice's sudden collapse, Chloe's suspicious generosity, her Martha Stewart act. My own eyes witnessing her pull that tiny vial from her purse and empty it into my chipped champagne glass. I described the switch, my quick, quiet movement, Marcus's visit, his forced concern, and the egregious pitch for Sunset Manor. Arthur listened, his gaze unwavering, his hand occasionally stroking his chin. He didn't interrupt, just absorbed every detail. When I finished, a heavy silence filled the room. Arthur finally spoke, his voice low. "The problem, Eleanor," he began, "is proving intent. If Chloe were confronted, she could claim it was a harmless supplement, a vitamin perhaps, without testing the remaining champagne, and if no one else saw her, we have no direct evidence of attempted murder against you," he continued, laying out the grim reality. "Even if we did somehow prove the champagne had poison, they could still argue. She could claim she was targeting Beatrice, or that it was meant for herself. It becomes a he said, she said scenario, incredibly difficult to prove in court, especially without clear motive or a history of animosity between Chloe and Beatrice." His words painted a stark picture of the legal hurdles ahead. "And there's another approach they might take," Arthur warned, his expression grim. "Legal challenges to your competency." My blood ran cold. Grounds could be your age, living alone, or even the stress from selling your business. They could argue you're no longer capable of managing your own affairs. I immediately connected the dots. "That's why the nursing home," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Sunset Manor. It's not just to get my money. It's to isolate me, to surround me with their chosen medical staff who might document signs of confusion or dementia, especially if they were paid well enough to do so." The thought made my stomach churn. It was a perfectly crafted cage, designed to strip me of my wealth and my autonomy, all under the guise of care. Arthur nodded slowly. "Precisely." We need to counter that. Immediately. He leaned forward, his demeanor shifting into full strategist mode. Here's our action plan, Eleanor. First, we get you evaluated by a highly reputable geriatric psychiatrist, someone completely independent. We need to document your current mental state, unequivocally proving your sound mind. This will create a formidable barrier against any competency challenge. Second, he continued, we get creative with your estate planning. We need to make it impossible for them to challenge your decisions or access your funds without triggering alarms. He outlined various trust structures, irrevocable trusts, medical directives, and financial arrangements that would trigger automatic audits and legal reviews if anyone tried to circumvent them. We'll tie everything up so tight that only you, and whoever you explicitly name, can control your assets. Any attempt to question it will be a legal quagmire that will cost them far more than they could ever hope to gain. Finally, he looked at me, his gaze serious. And Eleanor, your personal safety. If they tried once, they will try again. Perhaps more subtly. Perhaps more forcefully. He paused, letting the words sink in. I recommend a full security assessment of your home. Security cameras, motion sensors, a panic button system that alerts authorities directly. We do this for all our high net worth clients who find themselves in unusual family situations. Driving home, the world seemed to have changed. Every car behind me, every shadow, every person I passed, felt like a potential threat. Paranoia, raw and cold, settled deep in my bones. I remembered something my late husband, George, used to say when I worried about business rivals trying to poach clients. You're not paranoid if they're really after you, Eleanor. His words echoed in my mind, a chilling comfort. The phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. It was Chloe again, her voice annoyingly cheerful. Mom, just wanted to let you know, Beatrice is home from the hospital. She's doing much better, but she doesn't remember much about the party. Bless her heart. And she's really not up for visitors yet. Needs to rest for a few days. There it was again. The calculated isolation. They didn't just want me out of the way. They wanted to control every narrative, every witness. Beatrice, my accidental savior, was now conveniently unreachable. I looked at my grand old house. No longer just a home, but a fortress under siege. They thought I was old. A soft target. Easily manipulated. They had forgotten who I was, the woman who built a $23 million empire from nothing. A cold, fierce resolve hardened within me. Sometimes, I thought, gripping the steering wheel, the best defense is a good offense. Time to show my family what a 70-year-old woman was really capable of. The next morning, my house hummed with a new kind of energy. 3 technicians from a top-tier security firm, arranged by Arthur, moved efficiently through every room. They installed motion detectors at strategic points, discrete cameras, and a state-of-the-art panic button system that could summon help directly to my location. To my curious neighbors, I simply explained I'd been having problems with package theft lately, a believable fib in our neighborhood. The technicians were professionals. They knew how to be discreet, how to make the system look innocuous. My fortress was being built. By early afternoon, Arthur's messenger arrived. A stern-faced woman who handled sensitive documents. She delivered a thick packet. My updated will, detailed trust documents, and comprehensive medical directives. All were properly witnessed and notarized, legally airtight. I sat down and reviewed every line, a cold satisfaction spreading through me. The new will was a masterpiece of strategic disinheritance. Marcus's inheritance had been dramatically cut. Instead of receiving the bulk of my $23 million, he would now receive a modest $50,000 a year, placed in a carefully structured trust fund, to be distributed only under specific, strict conditions. The vast majority of my fortune was now earmarked for cancer research, a cause close to my heart since losing my husband, and several other well-vetted charities. As for Chloe, the architect of my near demise, she got nothing. Not a penny. Attempted murder, however well executed, was where I drew the line. I knew this would infuriate them, but that was part of the plan. I needed them to know, without me ever having to say the words. Just as I finished reviewing the final page, a chime echoed through the house. The doorbell. My security monitor flashed, showing Marcus and Chloe on my porch, both looking somewhat grim. Perfect timing. I let them in, observing the immediate change in Marcus's demeanor. His eyes, always scanning, quickly landed on the new security camera, nestled near my front door. "What's this, Mom?" he asked, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "Oh, that?" I replied smoothly, adopting a light, airy tone. "Just a little upgrade. Package theft, you know. You can't be too careful these days." I smiled, a small, innocent smile that belied the steel in my heart. Chloe, ever the performer, began her theatrical act. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd seemingly produced from nowhere. "Mom," she started, her voice quivering slightly. "We feel absolutely terrible about having the party at that estate. If something we brought, or organized, somehow caused Beatrice to get sick." She let the sentence hang, implying a vague, unconfirmed culpability that was easy to dismiss. Marcus quickly chimed in, reinforcing her act. "Exactly, Mom. I'd never forgive myself if we'd accidentally put you in danger." The irony was almost comical. Then came the real reason for their unannounced visit, the carefully rehearsed pitch. Chloe took my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "We think it might be better if we took care of you for a while, Mom. Just until we're sure you're safe. We have plenty of room, and we could keep a closer eye on you." They launched into yesterday's arguments, a recycled script. "You're 70 years old, Eleanor," Marcus said, his voice laced with feigned concern. "Living alone in this big house. What if something happens and no one finds you for days?" He looked at Chloe, who nodded vigorously, adding, "It's just too much for you to manage, dear." I let them finish, absorbing every word, every carefully chosen phrase. When they were done, I leaned back in my chair, a thoughtful expression on my face. "You know," I said slowly, "you're absolutely right. Anything could happen at my age. That's exactly why I spent the day updating my will." The effect was instantaneous and profound. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. Marcus's face, which had been pale, now looked utterly devoid of color. Chloe's hand, still clutching mine, went completely slack. Her eyes, moments ago brimming with theatrical tears, were now wide and unblinking, her voice when she spoke, a carefully neutral whisper. "Updating your will?" I gave them a cold, knowing smile. It was the same smile I'd used when Marcus was 8 years old, and I'd caught him lying about breaking my favorite Ming vase. He recognized it instantly. "Oh, yes," I said, a little too brightly. "Just some minor adjustments. You know, making sure everything is in order." The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with unspoken accusations and dawning realization. They exchanged a quick, panicked glance. Their game had been called, even if they didn't yet know the full extent of my countermove. Without another word, they stood up, muttered, hurried goodbyes, and practically fled the house. I watched them on my security monitor as they hurried to their car. They immediately launched into an intense conversation, their faces tight with anger and confusion. Chloe pulled out her phone, gesticulating wildly as she made an angry call, no doubt to Arthur, or perhaps to one of their own lawyers, to find out what minor adjustments could possibly mean. I poured myself a glass of my preferred wine, a deep, rich Cabernet. It was the first peaceful evening I'd had in days. The house felt secure, my future protected, and a deeply satisfying sense of anticipation settled over me. They were just beginning to realize their mistake. Phase 2 was well underway. The twists and turns in this story just keep coming, don't they? If you're as gripped as I am, make sure to keep watching, hit that like button, share this with someone who loves a good family drama, and subscribe so you don't miss a single part. The very next morning, a soft knock at my front door brought an unexpected visitor. On my security monitor, I saw Beatrice Peterson, looking pale but determined. Her hair was a little disheveled, but her eyes held a spark of clarity that Chloe would have absolutely hated. "Eleanor," she said, her voice a little weak but firm as I opened the door. "I need to talk to you. It's about the other night." She was far more coherent than her daughter would have liked me to believe. We settled in the living room, a pot of tea steaming between us. "My doctor kept talking about medication reactions," Beatrice began, shaking her head. But I told him, "I don't take any, not a single prescription, just vitamins." He looked so confused. Then, her memories started to flood back, details that Chloe had probably hoped would be lost in the haze of the toxin. "That champagne," Beatrice said, a shudder running through her. "It tasted so strange, bitter, almost metallic, right as it went down. I thought it was just a bad bottle." Her eyes widened slightly. "And I remember seeing Chloe near the drinks table. Right before I took that sip, she was doing something with a small bottle. I just thought she was adding a special mixer for you." Her hands, resting on her teacup, began to tremble. Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. "Eleanor," she finally said, her eyes pleading for understanding, "I think my daughter tried to poison you." The raw truth of her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Beatrice then revealed Chloe's consistent obsession with my wealth. "She always talks about it. Eleanor, how unfair it is that you have so much and they struggle. How much easier their lives would be if something happened to you." Beatrice looked away, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "She even asked me, just a few weeks ago, if you'd updated your will recently." She seemed very concerned about Marcus's inheritance. Her gaze returned to mine, filled with a terrible certainty. "I think they've been planning this for a while." My heart ached for Beatrice, caught in this web of her daughter's making. She deserved to know the full truth, no matter how painful. "Beatrice," I began, my voice steady. "I need to tell you something. I saw Chloe put something in my champagne glass. That glass, the one with the chip on the rim, it was meant for me." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I switched our drinks. Deliberately. I saw her. I knew." Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes filled with horror, not just for me, but for herself, for the terrible realization of what her own daughter was capable of. "She tried to kill you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, "and I almost died instead." We sat in shocked silence, the enormity of the betrayal weighing heavily between us. After a long moment, Beatrice looked at me, her resolve returning. "What are you going to do, Eleanor?" I met her gaze, a fierce glint in my eyes. "I'm going to give them exactly what they want," I said, a slight, humorless smile playing on my lips, just not the way they expect to get it. Once Beatrice left, promising to keep her silence for now, I made another crucial call. "Victoria," I said, my voice crisp. Victoria Stone was an old business contact, a shrewd woman who now ran a highly successful private investigation firm. "I need a personal favor, and it's urgent." I quickly outlined the basics of my request, omitting the poisoning for now, focusing instead on the financial aspect. "I need you to investigate everything about my son Marcus's finances, and his wife Chloe's too. Every bank account, every debt, every secret. I want a full report in 48 hours. Victoria, ever efficient, simply said, "Consider it done, Eleanor." My next move involved Marcus. I called him, inviting him to lunch at a charming little Italian place we used to frequent when he was a boy. A restaurant full of sentimental memories. "Marcus," I said, my voice gentle over the phone. "I've been thinking a lot about your and Chloe's concerns for my safety, and about Sunset Manor." His enthusiasm was palpable even through the phone line. When we met, his face was bright with eager anticipation, a stark contrast to his grim expression yesterday. We talked about trivialities over pasta, and then I delivered the bait. "You know," I said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "You're both absolutely right. I am getting older, and I do need to be more careful. I think it's time to make some changes." Marcus's face lit up, a greedy glint in his eyes that he quickly tried to mask. "Mom, that's wonderful news. What kind of changes? Well, I continued, taking a sip of my wine. I actually called Sunset Manor this morning. Spoke to a lovely woman there. And believe it or not, she said a unit just opened up. But, I added, lowering my voice, they need to fill it quickly. By Friday, to be exact. His excitement was barely contained. That's amazing, Mom. See? It's fate, perhaps, I said, allowing myself a small, secretive smile. There's just one thing. The facility requires a power of attorney on file, someone reliable, who can oversee my affairs and ensure my wishes are met, especially with the immediate payment for the unit. I looked him directly in the eye. Marcus, would you be willing to take that on for me? He didn't hesitate. Mom! Of course. It would be my honor. Anything to make sure you're safe and secure. He beamed, clearly believing he had won. He walked straight into the trap, utterly oblivious to the razor-sharp edges waiting to close around him. Thursday morning, Victoria Stone called, her voice crisp and professional. Eleanor, I have that report for you. The details she laid out were even worse than I'd imagined, confirming my darkest suspicions about Marcus and Chloe's dire financial situation. They're leveraged to the hilt, Eleanor, Victoria stated flatly. Their ridiculous house, as you called it, has been refinanced 3 times. They have 2 outstanding mortgages and a maxed-out home equity line of credit. On top of that, over $80,000 in credit card debt across multiple accounts. Marcus's architectural firm, as expected, was a financial black hole. It's been operating at a significant loss for the past 2 years, Victoria continued. They've essentially been using credit cards to pay other credit cards. It's a house of cards, Eleanor, ready to collapse at any moment. Then came the truly chilling revelation. And this is the most disturbing part. Victoria's voice hardened slightly. Chloe took out a life insurance policy on you 6 months ago. For $500,000. She's listed as the sole beneficiary. My blood ran cold. 6 months. My death had been planned for months, not days. This wasn't a desperate, spur-of-the-moment act. This was premeditated, calculated, cold. It painted an even darker picture of their greed and malice. Victoria wasn't done. One more thing, Eleanor. Marcus has been making regular, significant payments for the past 3 months to a Dr. Julian Thorne. He's a geriatric psychiatrist. The name struck a familiar, unsettling chord. That afternoon, Marcus and Chloe arrived at my house, a large leather briefcase clutched by Marcus. They were brimming with barely suppressed excitement, their smiles wide and predatory. They spread the Sunset Manor paperwork across my dining table like generals planning a battle. Here it is, Mom, Marcus announced, sliding a thick packet towards me. The admission contract. It's all straightforward. Then, the financial disclosure form. This document, they explained, required access to all my assets to ensure I could cover the hefty upfront fee and ongoing care costs. Just standard procedure, Mom, Chloe chirped, her eyes shining with avarice. Next, Marcus slid over another document, one with a prominent title, Durable Power of Attorney. This is pretty standard, too, he said, waving a dismissive hand. Pay bills, manage your investments, that sort of thing. But I knew better. I picked up the POA document and read it carefully, my heart pounding with a cold anger. It was far more comprehensive than standard. It gave Marcus sweeping authority over my finances, my medical decisions, even my living arrangements, with very few limitations. It was a complete surrender of my autonomy. I looked at them, feigning a moment of hesitation. Do I really need to give you this much authority, Marcus? I asked, my voice tinged with a carefully crafted uncertainty. He rushed to reassure me. Oh, absolutely, Mom. It's just a precaution. With all your assets, and the move, it just makes everything smoother, less stress for you. And if I change my mind? I probed, my gaze moving between them. Once I move into Sunset Manor, can I revoke this power of attorney easily? Chloe, ever the one to manage the finer, more insidious details, stepped in. Well, Mom, it's a little complicated once you're a resident. They have very strict policies. It would involve medical evaluations to ensure you're still of sound mind. You know, just to protect everyone." Her words were smooth, but the implication was chilling. The pieces clicked perfectly into place. Their full plan was now laid bare before me. They intended to isolate me in Sunset Manor, gain complete financial control through the POA, and then use Dr. Julian Thorne, the geriatric psychiatrist Marcus had been paying, to declare me incompetent if I ever resisted or tried to revoke their power. It was a meticulously crafted trap, designed to strip me of everything. Legally, I gathered the pile of documents, my face impassive. "This is a lot to take in," I said, pushing them back across the table. Marcus immediately protested. "Mom, we need to move quickly. That unit at Sunset Manor could be gone by Friday." "Then it's gone," I replied calmly. "I will not be rushed into a decision this important. I will review these documents tonight, and we can discuss them further tomorrow." I gave them a dismissive wave, signaling the end of the meeting. They left, clearly frustrated, but too afraid to push me further and risk losing the whole scheme. The moment they were gone, I picked up the phone and dialed Arthur. "Arthur," I said, without preamble, "tell me what you know about a Dr. Julian Thorne, a geriatric psychiatrist." Arthur's voice on the other end was grim. "Ah, Thorne. He has a reputation, Eleanor, known for being accommodating to families seeking to declare elderly relatives incompetent, especially when there are significant assets involved. He's expensive, but effective, if you're looking for that kind of outcome." A cold, hard resolve settled in my heart. "I need you to prepare something for me, Arthur," I instructed, my voice clear and firm. "Something that's going to teach my family a lesson they'll never forget. Something that will hit them where it hurts the most." Friday morning dawned gray and drizzling, a perfect backdrop for the storm I was about to unleash. At precisely 9 o'clock, Marcus and Chloe arrived, both dressed immaculately, as if attending an important business meeting. Their faces were flushed with anticipation, barely concealing their predatory excitement. They believed today was the day they would finally secure their fortune. I greeted them with a calm, almost serene smile. Come in," I said, leading them to the dining room table where I had carefully arranged the Sunset Manor paperwork. I had signed and notarized the admission contract and the financial disclosure form, just as they wanted. I've thought about it," I began, my voice a little softer than usual, "and I think you're right. It's time for me to start this new chapter." Chloe's visible relief was palpable, a soft sigh escaping her lips. Marcus's hands, however, actually trembled as he reached for the power of attorney documents. He scanned them quickly, a triumphant gleam in his eyes as he saw my signature. They thought they had won. For the next hour, I played my part perfectly. I provided them with account numbers, access codes, and details about my various investments. Chloe sat across from me, furiously typing everything into her laptop, occasionally sharing meaningful, excited looks with Marcus. They were like vultures, circling their prey, completely unaware that they were flying into my net. "Just one more thing," I said, interrupting their hurried whispers. "Before the transfer of funds for Sunset Manor is official, I need to sign some additional paperwork with my attorney. Something about tax implications with such a large sum." It was a lie, of course, a final piece of bait, designed to ensure they'd be here for the grand finale. Marcus, ever eager to appear helpful, immediately offered, "I can drive you, Mom. We can go straight from here." Just then, the doorbell chimed. I glanced at the security monitor. 2 figures stood on my porch, a tall, formidable woman in a dark suit, and a uniformed officer beside her. Detective Grace Riley. "Ah," I said, a genuine smile touching my lips. "They're here." I opened the door. Detective Riley's gaze swept over Marcus and Chloe, then settled on me. "Wilson," she said, her voice calm and authoritative, "we need to speak with you and your family about an incident that occurred at your home earlier this week. Specifically, a suspected poisoning at a party you hosted." Chloe's face drained of color. Poisoning? She stammered, attempting to recover. Oh, detective, that was just a reaction to Beatrice's medication. The doctors confirmed it. She tried to stick to the script. Detective Riley's expression remained unyielding. Actually, Mrs. Peterson, the toxicology results are in. We found a concentrated amount of oleander extract in Miss Peterson's system. That's not a medication. It's a deadly poison. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. We also tested the remaining champagne from your party. The same oleander extract was found. Someone deliberately poisoned that champagne. Marcus stared at Chloe, his face a mask of horror. Chloe, he whispered, his voice trembling. What did you do? Nothing! Chloe shrieked, her voice shrill with panic. I didn't do anything. This is a mistake. We don't believe it's a mistake, Mrs. Peterson, Detective Riley said, her eyes fixed on Chloe. Our investigation indicates that the glass with the highest concentration of poison was originally intended for Mrs. Wilson here. She gestured towards me. A sickening realization dawned on Marcus. He looked from the detective to Chloe, then to me. A dawning horror in his eyes. Detective? I said, my voice cutting through the suddenly thick silence. Show them the insurance policy. Riley nodded, reaching into her jacket pocket. She pulled out a folded document and presented it to them. This is a $500,000 life insurance policy taken out on Mrs. Wilson 6 months ago. Mrs. Peterson, you are listed as the sole beneficiary. The air in the room became charged. Chloe stared at the document, her denial crumbling. I finally turned to Chloe, my eyes cold and unwavering. I saw you, Chloe. I saw you put the poison in my champagne glass. Jessica. I used her full name, a stark formality. I switched our drinks deliberately. I knew what you were doing. Marcus's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and betrayal. You knew? You knew she was trying to poison you? He looked at me, then back at Chloe, utterly devastated. I've known for days. Marcus, I replied, my voice devoid of warmth. I also know about your dire financial situation, about Dr. Julian Thorne, the geriatric psychiatrist you've been paying, about your plan to have me declared incompetent and steal everything I own. I know about everything. The power of attorney papers, which Marcus still clutched, slipped from his numb fingers and fluttered to the floor. His entire scheme, his entire life of carefully constructed lies, was collapsing around him. Detective Riley stepped forward, her handcuffs glinting. Jessica Peterson, you are under arrest for attempted murder. As the cuffs clicked into place, Chloe turned to me, her eyes blazing with a hatred so intense it almost physically burned. You think you're so clever, don't you? She snarled, her voice raw with rage. You have no idea what you've done. I met her gaze, a chilling calm settling over me. Actually, Chloe, I replied, my voice soft but utterly resolute. I know exactly what I've done. Chloe was being led away by Detective Riley, spitting threats. Marcus stood frozen. The fake power of attorney papers scattered around his feet like fallen leaves. The house was suddenly quiet, save for his ragged breathing. He sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. Mom, he mumbled, his voice muffled by despair. She told me it was just about getting you somewhere safe. That the money was for the Sunset Manor fee, and then we'd manage your finances from there. I didn't know she would. She would try to kill you. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. We're so deep in debt, Mom. We thought if you died naturally, we'd inherit enough to start over. She just wanted to speed things up, to make sure you were moved before anyone suspected. Give me your phone, Marcus, I demanded, my voice cold and steady. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly handed it over. I scrolled through his text messages with Chloe. There it was, in plain black and white. Exchanges about getting her moved, references to me asking too many questions about our finances, and Chloe's chilling reply. Not after tomorrow night. You knew, Marcus, I said, handing back his phone. You knew she was planning something dark. He nodded miserably. I thought she meant to scare you into the nursing home. To make you think you needed their protection. Not murder. He looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. I just wanted to make sure you were in the nursing home, so you wouldn't be questioning our finances, or what we were doing. I thought it was not murder, just something that would convince you to move to Sunset Manor willingly. And Dr. Julian Thorne? I pressed, revealing the findings from my private investigator. The geriatric psychiatrist you've been paying for months? Marcus flinched. That was our backup plan, he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. If you refused to sign the power of attorney, Thorne would have declared you incompetent. We could have taken over then. Legally, I leaned forward, my voice cutting through his despair. You see, Marcus, that's where you both fundamentally misunderstood. Those power of attorney papers you just signed? I pointed to the scattered documents. They're fake. They grant you control over an account with exactly $1 in it. His eyes widened in disbelief, then horror. What? My real money, I continued, all $23 million, is safely protected in irrevocable trusts. Trusts you can't touch, can't challenge. My updated will leaves you a modest annual income, a small fraction of what you expected. And that, Marcus, will disappear entirely if you're convicted of any crime related to this. He stared at me, then crumpled, tears streaming down his face. You've destroyed my life, he sobbed. No, Marcus, I replied, my voice firm. You destroyed your own life. I just made sure you couldn't destroy mine in the process. Watching my son break, I felt no satisfaction, no vindication, just a deep, bone-weary sadness for the man he'd chosen to become, consumed by greed. Justice, however, was swift and unyielding. 3 months later, Chloe Peterson was sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted murder. Marcus, after a plea deal where he cooperated with the prosecution, received 3 years for conspiracy. He wasn't directly involved in the poisoning, but his knowledge and participation in the broader scheme to declare me incompetent was enough. In the midst of the legal proceedings, my granddaughter, Sophia, called. Her voice was raw with apology, horrified by her parents' actions. Grandma, she cried. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Sophia was innocent, a bright, kind young woman. I invited her to visit, recognizing that she deserved a chance to forge her own path, free from her parents' poisonous influence. Beatrice, my accidental hero, became an unexpected friend. Bonded by our shared experience of family betrayal, we spent hours talking, sipping tea, and even laughing. She found a new purpose, considering writing a book about elder abuse, her quiet strength inspiring. Reflecting on my choices, I felt no regret for protecting myself. I regret that it was necessary, I told Arthur one afternoon. But I don't regret protecting myself. Arthur Caldwell visited me again, bringing good news. Chloe's life insurance policy on you has been voided, he confirmed. And per the terms of your will, and their legal judgments, Marcus's remaining assets, including his over-mortgaged house, have been seized to cover his legal debts and restitution. My trust restructuring was complete, my assets fully protected and securely managed for the charitable causes I had chosen. I briefly considered buying back Marcus's house, but quickly dismissed the idea. It held too many bitter memories. I wanted a new life, a new perspective, untainted by their greed. Money, I realized, wasn't just about what it could buy. It was about the strength it gave you, the resilience it afforded, and the freedom to choose your own path. A few months later, I received a text message from Sophia. She had been accepted to Northwestern Pre-Law, a brilliant, hopeful future stretching before her. I smiled, a genuine, warm smile. That, I thought, is the real victory. Ensuring that the next generation, at least one of them, makes better choices. Underestimating a sharp old woman is a very expensive mistake.